Hello viewers and welcome to my blog for the Singapore Grand Prix then 2013, the night race of the year. Of course we've got the Abu Dhabi, but that's day and night as well, and the big event, this spectacle, the fifth time it's been there this year. Moving on, we've seen the dominance of Sebastian Vettel in recent races, practice session, despite the first practice being won by Lewis Hamilton. From then on, Vettel took control and he never let control from there, with a dominating performance in qualifying for him. There was some heart-stopping moments with obviously Nico closing up on him, but certainly on this occasion Vettel has the car and it's all working for him at the moment. It seemed to be almost all too easy for him with just the one final run. Moving swiftly onto the race today, and again it was one of those races where we say, can anyone beat Sebastian into the first corner? We know he's got the fastest car, he's just going to get away, and that's exactly what happened. Nico got off the line well, but was unable to hold Sebastian back. He got past, and then you know that's all over. Award has to go to Fernando Alonso. If I had done that on the game, I'd have people complaining, I can tell you, for overtaking too many cars in the first corner. But there you go, it shows it happens when the cars are backed up behind each other. It shows that if you're running a different thought process, you can just skip around the outside. And I think one thing to highlight on the game is, on the game, people often, if they crash at the start, then they restart. So it's easy on the game to find that optimum. If every F1 driver could restart, you'd see a lot more starts like that. But certainly fantastic for Fernando, and which really sort of set his race up. Now, tyre degradation was very high today. We saw a lot of marbles around the track, certainly an exceptional amount. We always do at Singapore, but this year certainly degradation seemed very high indeed. And it seemed to be inconclusive between the two compounds, marginally which one was the best one to drive on and which one was going to last. First main incident I'm going to talk about in the race, though, is a Hulkenberg incident when he was knocked by, it appeared to be contact between him and Perez. Hulkenberg had to go wide, or was knocked wide, one or the other. Certainly appeared to me like he was knocked, and then was given a penalty for going off the track. Found that very strange. One thing I don't disagree on with the stewards, I don't know how they come to that conclusion, where their thinking was. Perez was never ahead. He was going into a gap that was decreasing rapidly. He was the second place car in that battle. How did they work that one out? Very, very strange indeed. Moving on, of course, we had the crash. Daniel Ricciardo, shame for him, isn't it? He's under pressure at the moment to constantly do the business, of getting that Red Bull seat next year. Red Bull will be hoping they don't see a repeat of that. It looked like more of a loss in concentration than anything else, probably messing about with something in the car that needed to be fixed or whatever. You don't know what these drivers are dealing with when they're on the way round, and unfortunately for him, ended in the barrier. They brought out the safety car, and that really mucked everything up for everybody then. We had the different sort of fuel strategies, the tyre strategies and everything else. Sebastian was told that he had enough fuel to run to the end of the race, so he wouldn't have to go lean on that anymore, and I'm sure that affected a few of the drivers. But tyre degradation was high, and so a lot of drivers were juggling up whether to do 2 or 3 stops. Certainly it seemed to be 3 stops was the way to go for many of them. Of course, a couple of people, Fernando and Kimi pitted with obviously Jensen under the safety car, which benefited them very well. Following that, we had Grosjean's incident with the engine. Really unlucky for Roman. He's been a guy under pressure. Last year he had the crash fest last year. This year he's been a little bit more down in the mouth. His driving's not been as dynamic as it was, and it's a shame because it's these little erratic decisions, and now he's controlling his whole driving. Today's race was going really well for him. It was a great weekend, and unfortunately the engine overheated, issues there, and he had to pull out of the race. Really unlucky for him. Of course, later in the race we had Webber and Hamilton and Rosberg pitting. Nico certainly wasn't very happy with the strategy the team took. It seemed to be me that he felt he could stay out there with Fernando. He would have been ahead of Fernando in terms of track position, and if he hadn't stopped he would have retained that. So he feels that perhaps the team sort of let him down. He'd certainly be looking into that one. A mixed bag. I mean, for Lewis, obviously, it was just one of those days. He was just working his way up slowly. And, of course, Mark Webber, really, again, one of those guys you just wanted to see on the podium. And, of course, the engine failing towards the end there for him again, overheating. Very tough on the cars, very tough on the drivers. Certainly, it's a demanding course. It's hard enough just getting perfect laps on it. But getting perfect laps when you have one line you can drive on, if you go off that line, you're on the marbles. Besides keeping your tyres working, your engine cooled and everything else, it really is a challenge for the drivers. And of course, we had McLaren there. Jenson Button almost to the podium, within sight with 10 laps to go, but unfortunately it wasn't going to happen for him this time. Again, he's driving the wheels off the car, it's not going anywhere, the tyres were gone, had that battle holding back Kimi for so long, but of course, as we know, the Lotus holds onto its tyres so much better, and the McLaren unfortunately wasn't able to stay in there. 7th and 8th for McLaren today. Perez with an 8th place. He's trying to hold on to his drive. It certainly is an interesting year. We've got Felipe Massa pushing as hard as he can to retain a place in Formula One. We've got Perez trying to retain his drive. We've got Nico Hülkenberg battling to get a better drive at the moment. He deserves a better drive. And Damon Hill was mentioning, obviously, that he'd seen people talking to senior people at Lotus. We might see Nico Hülkenberg at Lotus. Who knows? We may even see him at McLaren. You just don't know. Ron Dennis was with McLaren at this race. That means Ron Dennis is doing business. So obviously he's after a couple of drivers, and he'll be sitting down with some team management throughout the weekend, no doubt, and they'll be making a decision. I don't think a decision will be too far off. They will want one before the end of the season. There's no doubt about it. Vettel, meanwhile, it was a dominating race for him, wasn't it? Again, overtakes one car on the first corner, and there's no race for him then. It's just a time trial session, managing the car, managing the tyres. He's got an Adrian Newey car. Mark Webber is in the sister car testing 2014 bits, and so he's got a nice functioning car under him that works really well all the way through the race. He's not behind anyone, his car's not overheating, no excessive tyre degradation in battles, and it's pretty easy for him. Fernando Alonso, cracking drive, second place from, where was he, 7th on the grid, something like that. Fantastic. The great start combined with the tyre strategy that worked out for him, notably I think probably because Jenson Button was holding back Kimi Raikkonen. Raikkonen third with a bad back. Wow, people couldn't really appreciate how brutal one of those cars is, accelerating and the bumps on a bad back as well. I've had a bad back recently, and I can tell you right now, it's not comfortable in the slightest in a racing car or a kart or anything like that. So certainly a good result from him. Mercedes, I think they'll be moderately pleased. It's one of those races. It could have gone either way for him. Rosberg, obviously, he'll be having a word with the team, and I think McLaren, they're just wanting to stay ahead of Force India at the moment. Force India have kind of tailed off a little bit throughout the season, and in my chat with Johnny Herbert last week, you'll have seen us talk about Ferrari, Lotus and Force India, and how they've been affected by the change from the 2013 back to the 2012 tyres, so in form of construction. So an interesting race. We've had the news, obviously, that Kimi Raikkonen is going to Ferrari. It's still not confirmed with Fernando. It looks like Fernando will be lining up there with Ferrari, with Kimi, even though he's not necessarily best pleased about it. We're going to have musical chairs in McLaren, in Lotus. We've heard the talk of the engines and how the engines work, and it's interesting there. Are Mercedes going to have a car that's 2 or 3 seconds a lap faster? I'm going to talk about that again later. It's certainly interesting to see where the engine technology is going for next year. But Ross Brawn was very confident when talking about next year's car and the engine, how it's developing, and certainly he feels. And unfortunately, my memory died there on the camera, but we're back. So finally, a mention has to go to the discussion of finances within Formula One. There's been some openness this weekend from Tony Fernandez that the money isn't well spread out through the teams in comparison to, say, football. That the teams need to do more to spread that money out to make it a more competitive sport. Everyone wants their bit, and nobody's prepared to give. And there was also a mention from Force India, that from the principal's press conference, that maybe the FOM and the FIA should step in and decide how that's all going to work in the future. I think it's an interesting one. Clearly, the money has to be better spread between the teams, and how that works. We want to see competitive cars all the way along the grid, and the way it's working currently is pretty ridiculous. I remember a situation a few years ago when Justin Wilson was in Minardi. He had a day job teaching people how to race racing cars, while Michael Schumacher was at the other end earning £25 million a year. Certainly that's a situation that shouldn't exist ever in the top flight of motorsport. There's enough money to go round, and it's weighted wrongly, but we'll wait and see. That's a conversation the Schumacher Schumacher issue, that was probably 10 years ago. So perhaps in 10 years we'll still be saying the same things. Who knows? Or it might mean that some of the independent teams begin to fall away. Hope that doesn't happen, but it certainly seems we're secure for the next few years as well. And you never know. With the engines becoming more relevant, the price on them might drop quicker than people expect, but we just don't know. Formula One is an expensive business for anyone involved. You know that when you get involved in it. So I think you need to use your own forecasts and look ahead. And let's face it, there's nobody in Formula One who can't afford to be there in the first place. That's one thing for certain. So the Singapore Grand Prix, certainly it's been an interesting race, I think, but I think it just shows the state of play. Sebastian is in a great car. It's an Adrian Newey car. It's very strong. Doesn't look like anyone's going to beat him this year. We'd need to see a radical change in the other teams, and we need to see Sebastian out of 2 or 3 races at least. And even then, I think it would mean Fernando having to win every race pretty much this season. It certainly seems like a long shot at the moment, but you never know. Our final note has to go on the booing that we've been seeing on the podium. I think a lot of the booing is down to obviously Sebastian overtaking Marc. That shameless move, disgusting move that he did in Malaysia. People are booing that still. They think it's disappointing. But also, I think really they do see a Schumacher era. And what's the similarity between Schumacher era and the Vettel era? It's not just that Schumacher was the best driver. Schumacher was a driver in the best car. Vettel is a driver in the best car, and you don't really feel that anyone else is in a similar car. People would say Mark Webber, but it's the same colour, but you don't know it's the same car. Mark Webber's car has countless problems. Sebastian's doesn't. Obviously they're testing 2014 parts there, possibly. And it's the same with the Schumacher era. You just felt that he was in a better car than anyone. There was no one that could compete at the time. So it's a similar set of circumstances, but I think that's why when you come to somewhere like Malaysia and you see that move, you say, why did you do that, Seb? Was it absolutely necessary that you underhandedly overtook your teammate? And he said to Ted Kravitz on the Sky F1, we was racing. Well, we weren't racing. The multi-21 order had been given, and Mark was holding station and then was reacting to your movement rather than racing you. So certainly his perspective is one, no doubt. Michael Schumacher's had a word with him as well, and it's changed Seb and his approach and his outward approach to people over recent months. But certainly there seems to be a misunderstanding on what the booing means. The booing is about sportsmanship at the end of the day, and but I don't like hearing booing. I say that I think that the booing for a few races, okay, we came to Silverstone, there was the booing, we're letting him know we like Mark, Sebastian shouldn't have done that move, it was disgusting, it was unsportsmanlike. Monza, you're going to get that anyway if you're not a Ferrari driver, but I think it is becoming a pantomime now, and I think it's not really something that works in Formula One. These guys are all incredible drivers, and Sebastian is an incredible driver. It would just be nice, I think, to see him in a level playing field with everyone else, and how we'd be getting on then, because I don't think you'd be seeing quite the amount of composure from him if he was battling in the field that you get in the lead. And I think we saw that in 2010 a few times as well. Can kind of panic a little bit when he's in a car that's not right up there. So it's interesting. But that's it for the Singapore Grand Prix, and that's it for me for now. And as ever, there's been lots of F1 content you can see here on the channel. Do click on those links, and there'll be more from me very soon.